Thanks for having us. Hopefully this will be an exciting session. I've been part of the company for about 8 years now. I run the solutions architecture team for parts of ASEAN. I have this friendly banter with some of my Asia Pacific colleagues in terms of when we have events like this, who gets the maximum number of tweets in terms of likes. So if you want to connect with me, if you like something, that's my Twitter handle up there. And it's my absolute pleasure to have with me the CTO of not just any startup, but the CTO of iFlix in Emmanuel Frenehard. You want to give a quick introduction?
Thanks for having me. I like the subject of this talk because it's about hiring a rockstar team. And iFlix hired me 2.5 years ago from Disney, and I'd like to think that I'm one of the rock stars they hired. So let's, you and I should be rocking and waking up everybody around at that. I've been at iFlix for about 2.5 years. Prior to that, I spent 17 years of my life in a large media company called the Walt Disney Company. And so I was exposed to a lot of it. And as part of my role as CTO for International, I launched Disney's first video subscription service in the UK years ago. I'd like to consider myself a citizen of the world. I'm French. I was born in France. But I was very fortunate. I had upbringings in Egypt. I lived in Argentina and Brazil. I lived in the UK, in France, the US, and now I live in Malaysia. So I've started to complete the journey. I've got 2 kids. My wife and I have 2 kids. One of them was born in the US. One of them was born in the UK. And we've adopted a dog in Malaysia. So we're trying to round up the family. If you have more countries that we'd like to explore, let us know, because we are on our pilgrimage to look at the world.
And I believe you're also into martial arts. You love fighting.
I love fighting. I love fighting in many ways. I love fighting with the competition because it's always fun. But also personally, I'm an adept practitioner of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I've been doing that for 9 years. It's a true passion of mine. It keeps me fit mentally, physically. At the same time, it's like a chess game. If you ever looked at it, it's a real, true art. And there's nothing as pure as 2 humans fighting, because this is where, as far as I'm concerned, this is where you test yourself really to the max.
All right. In that case, I'll just step away 2 steps here. For someone so passionate about fighting, I gotta be careful. All right. So why are we doing this? Let's start with the obvious, right? I'm stating the obvious. The digital disruption is happening in the hospitality industry, in the transportation industry, or in the entertainment industry, be it the Grabs and iFlixes of the world, or even otherwise. And if you look at it, you see a lot of startup names, but we believe truly that it's also a myth that you can be only agile and innovative when you're a very, very small, tiny startup starting off. And when you explode through and become a bigger company and going through that exponential growth, you no longer can be agile and innovative. We think it's a myth. It actually comes down to culture. This is what's happening. This is what data shows, which is basically the lifespan of products, startups, and just Fortune 500 companies is actually gone down. It's about 20 years on an average. That's the valuation of mergers and acquisition that happened in 2018 alone. And so what does that show? It shows that companies don't last longer. And by the way, this 20-year stat was for 2018, as it stands today. In the 1950s and 60s, apparently that span of companies, on an average, used to be 60+ years, and about close to 100 years a few years before that. Right? So clearly, it's actually accelerating towards going downwards. And we've always believed at Amazon that culture is one of the principal components of innovation, right? It's not products and services, it's not technology, it's the people and the culture, which is maintaining an environment which is almost conducive to innovating every single day. Jeff Bezos was so obsessed with the day one philosophy that he decided to actually name our buildings day one north and south down in Seattle in headquarters. And if you think about it, it actually applies to everything in life, right? When you start exercising, if you're on a diet plan, it's the first week which is the easiest, after which it starts becoming difficult to sustain. And so that's what we're trying to do. We're not perfect, but what we're trying to achieve is rewire the environment and people's brains and our employees to make everyone think that it is day one, literally day one, in spite of what we have achieved in the last 25 years with the .com business as well as with AWS. And so what's also satisfying is that we see a lot of common tenets with us and some of our customers who also have certain of these, the terms might differ, but some of these tenets also exist within them. For example, with iFlix, with some of your culture.
So you speak about culture, we'll speak about our Tao, our values, but before that, I want to make sure that you understand what iFlix is, because we're very specifically targeting emerging markets. We're a video subscription service, and we have a common mission in our company, which is to redefine television for the next billion people, because we are true believers that TV can be transformed and disrupted in emerging markets, and it's not quite purely about video delivery. As a subscription service, we've done more in iFlix. We've done it differently. We've approached the market and understood the consumer from a different lens, because it's important to understand who you're addressing. We understand the consumer in emerging markets may not be ready yet to pay for subscription. So we have a free element of our content, which is ad sponsored. We also understood that the consumer is on a mobile device because the television of today in emerging market is that device, not the big screen that I have in front of me. The household doesn't have that big screen. It's all about the TV. So it's a portable experience, and it's data-centric, and it's optimized for mobile networks. We've also understood that the consumers that we're addressing, because they like TV, they like live television. If you think about TV, most of the analogy you have with television is live television. So we brought sport inside iFlix. We signed a 10-year agreement with the Malaysian Football League. In Malaysia, you can watch all the football games only on iFlix at any point in time, all live. So we've really looked at the business model and looked at it in a different way, because it's important to first look at your consumer. The second thing that we did, and because this is for all of you founders, all of you who are in startups, all of you who are looking at building your company to the next level, our CEO and co-founder have this concept of the Tao of iFlix. This has been very important to us, because what connects your company is the vision. Our vision is 1 billion people, television for 1 billion people. It's a hard vision. It's almost like a moonshot. But then how do you do that and transfer that vision into everyday activities? How do you transfer that vision into everyday connectivity and collaboration with the teams? And that's where our Tao, the values of iFlix, are important to us. You have to understand our values. A big part of our recruitment, and we're having a discussion yesterday between the Amazon recruitment process and the iFlix recruitment process, we focus first on the values. It's tremendously important for us that you connect with the rest of the team. We're hiring rock stars. We're not hiring assholes. We're hiring people that are very good and that can connect with the rest of the organization. We have 700 people. We have 700 rock stars at iFlix that work in unison. That's extremely important. And we have one motto. That motto is that hashtag whatever it takes. Because this is something that is really unique about being in a startup, is that you cannot afford complacency. The people that you bring have to be as eager as you are to disrupt the business model in their day-to-day lives. They have to be eager in the software they write. They have to be eager in the marketing plans they put out there, in the content they choose, the content they publish. They have to be eager to do whatever it takes to get there, because there's no limit you can put on yourselves. So before we get to the next thing, I wanted to show you what the Tao means for us from a video. You'll see there's a lot of data in it because we're a data-centric company. Most of it is fun data because we'd like to make fun of ourselves. I hope this gives you a glimpse a little bit of how important the values are and how much we apply ourselves to those values. And those values were quite differentiating for me personally. 3.5 years ago, 3 years ago, when iFlix was looking at finding a new CTO, and they came across my profile and they contacted me, It was about a job in a company I knew nothing about in a country that I had never been to. So it was about being CTO of iFlix. And my answer to them was, really, you couldn't find a more original name? And the second answer is, I'd never been to Malaysia. Why would I move there? I'm living in Los Angeles. Everything is fine. After having spent 17 years at Disney, I was quite comfortable working in a company that I understood well. And then I came across the Tao, and I was asked to go and spend some time reading the Tao. And these values, be brave, have the courage of do something different, have the courage of pushing the boundary. If you're in a startup and you're funding something that is disruptive, you've got to have huge guts. You've got to have that courage. And for me, it was the courage of changing career, moving uprooting my family, going into a company I knew nobody, in a business model that I wasn't very familiar with, in a region that I had never lived in. The only thing that I had done is coming to Singapore for work, for business. The second thing that is important for us is be real. Be a real human. Be yourself. So many times we pretend, we put this mask. You know, in the morning you put this mask on to just be somebody else, or somebody that you want them to think you should be, because that's how you conform. No, I love the fact that iFlix, we have 700 unique personalities. We don't have 700 androids. We have 700 unique individuals that are real. Be simple. Don't overcomplexify things. There's an easier way to look at things. There's always a possibility to make things simpler. But our human mechanic, our mind tricks us on the fact that things have to be really complicated. Be curious, be inquisitive, challenge things, ask questions. One of our key measurements of a good meeting at iFlix is the quality of the questions. We really judge the quality of the question. Because if the question, the first level of the question is usually a pretty superficial question. It's when you get down to level 5 of the question that you get into the real complexity and the real business at matter. And lastly, don't take yourself too seriously. Ultimately, we're all doing things that are complicated enough. We have to have some fun in doing it. So one thing that we do in all our offices, we have our manifesto. So it's the little dab that we put in every office. Every office has that in the wall. It's the giant manifesto. It reminds you that it's about the target of 1 billion people. So it reminds you of the vision. It reminds you of our common goal that we have that unifies us all. It reminds you that we're not super serious because you've got a big dab in the middle. It reminds you of whatever it takes. There is no saying no to things that we'll do. That's not a starting point for us. It will be the how. That will be the question, not the no.
And so you mentioned you do things a little differently, and we have this messaging within Amazon which says that if you're trying to achieve something big or different, you will be misunderstood by the outside world for long periods of time. So how do you make people, those 700 people, willing and ignore that and come into that groove? Like, not every people come from the same background. So how do you sort of instill that culture of the fact that they shouldn't be worried about what the external world thinks of them?
So we'll get more into that in a second, but reality is, I think we all have preconceived ideas. We all come with bias. We all start with certain amount of bias. I have it, and sometimes I have ideas that are presented by some really smart people, and I dismiss them. My brain automatically goes to the answering process of, that doesn't make any sense. Just keep that idea. Really, my brain is saying that was a stupid idea. Ignore it. But there's a lot of good ideas that have shocked me and have surprised me, and it came from markets that were completely unexpected, or from people that were completely unexpected. So I think we've opened ourselves to be challenged. There is no real hierarchical challenge dogma at iFlix. You can challenge anybody at iFlix, and if you equip yourself with data, it's even more powerful. I know you're a very data-driven company. You're going to get to it. But it's the same thing for us. If you equip yourself with data, with insights, we make our data very available. We've got a ton of access to our data, so our own employees can go and mine the data on their own time. And this is part of the inspiration we've taken from Amazon's vision of, if you allow people to seek their data, to seek that information, if you allow them to explore their thought process, because you can't have a single thought process. Every one of us has a unique thought process. If you allow them to explore it and substantiate it, they'll come back with much better ideas. So we don't turn ideas away.
Which brings us to the next topic, which is the kind of people we hire and the kind of people we have. And we have this term called as builders within AWS, which is basically the way we define builders is people who understand that, let's say, a launch of our service, let's say our software development engineers, they understand the launch of a service is not the end line, but the starting product. And starting with the MVP to constantly iterating, taking feedback from customers. And this concept is applicable to field teams as well, solution architects, sales reps, and the way we structure those builders to give them complete flexibility, freedom, and control is by this famous term that you would have heard in the past as well, or in these last 3 days, if you've been to a summit in the last 2 days, which is two-pizza teams. There is no single team in a particular project or a team handling a particular set of customers or working on a set of services should be bigger than a certain size that they can't be fed with 2 large pizzas. And the reason for that is, as companies grow bigger and as teams get bigger, the intercoordination between teams is what slows things down. And we don't want that. And Amazon, if you add our .com business, we are a 500,000 plus person company now. And we're going to be massively slow if we had to have a hierarchical pyramid structure. And this goes everywhere, even with software development engineers. There is no such thing as a religion or a strategy in terms of Java is going to be our primary language and Linux is going to be our operating system. We basically have just one rule, which is security. We never compromise security because we have customer data or credit cards in the case of .com business. And so security is our primary rule. As long as those guidelines are met, we don't really care what technologies or what open source platforms our two-pizza teams use. They are given complete freedom. And that makes us release services and products faster to market. And at iFlix, I believe you could probably do something similar.
We're quite similar. So we don't call our engineer builders, but we have the same philosophy. I think the main philosophy that we have at iFlix of our engineers is we empower them. We want them to be autonomous. When you're trying to do something as fast as we're trying to do, with as much disruption as we're doing, we want our engineers to be fully trusted and decide the best way to do things. We hire people based on their qualities. We don't hire people to just tell them exactly what they need to do. We hire them because you saw our values. You understand that we've got a high bar of hiring. They meet those values, and technically, we don't want to give them some sort of a policy. You must use this, you must use Node, and this is with Node that you will do everything you will do from now on. Please do not come back with any better technology or any different technology because it doesn't make sense to us. That's not how we operate. We operate on a principle that we're building a large-scale platform that is microservices driven. If you want to write that service with whatever language makes sense to you, and we can comfortably scale it, no worries about it. No problem whatsoever, no questions asked. But you need to document it because somebody's going to consume that service. Maybe or maybe not. But if you don't document it, and that service is now live, and we don't exactly know how it behaves, but you know how it behaves, then that's wrong. So we allow that complete autonomy of it. We also make sure that our teams are trained. You come into iFlix, our goal would be that you will become a better engineer by the end of your journey if you decide to leave us. So we train you. We train you on AWS because the infrastructure is very important to us. There's also something that is critical in our decision-making process. If AWS has that service, we don't write it. That's a big decision. I only have limited capacity. I only have limited human hours of the day, finances. You all have the same constraints. Maybe different scale, but we all have the same constraints. And functionality, time, quality, people, etc. We all have the same constraints. If I'm going to take some of the time and some of the investment that investors are trusting us with to go and write a service that already exists just because I can, that doesn't make any sense. So part of our journey is all the time reinventing and redisrupting our platform because suddenly Amazon comes with something that we used to be able to do. Maybe now we need to sunset it quickly, regain that capacity to go and do something that is functionality, that is differentiating for the end user. If it's not differentiating for the end user, and I don't have to do it, I won't be doing it. We've done that across 5 development centers. So not only we're a small company, we're also fairly global. We looked at where we could find talent, really. We looked at the talent pool. We're a company homed out of Kuala Lumpur, so we're very proud of having a development center in Kuala Lumpur, an engineering center in KL that has been growing over the years. We've built one in Prague, because we found great talent in Prague. We built one in Melbourne. We found great talent in Melbourne, and we kept going. We have one in Cape Town because we have a really strong payments team in Cape Town that you cannot hire. And then we have, now we're building one in Beijing. We've opened a development center in Beijing about a month ago. The only way this works when you're a company our size and this diverse and that dispersed is if you trust and empower your engineers. So as builders, as founders of companies, as entrepreneurs of companies, You need to trust your engineers. They will be the rock stars if you have set the hiring bar high and if you have common values that work across your company.
And so, just a question with all this expansion, have some countries been more difficult than others, or just been different?
They've all been very difficult.
Really?
It's been hard everywhere. It's very different. What was, I think, the biggest lesson learned for all of us is communication is it's the heart of everything. You know, communication at home is the difficulty. Communication with my wife can be the difficult part of things because I don't say things that I'm supposed to say or haven't said it. In a world where it's a world of engineers, in a world of engineers that tend to be quite direct, communication can be a big problem. So I've asked my teams, and you all know this, you've all done it. So I admit you've done it, is the email wars. You start by an email, and it says, yeah, here's what I want to do with this service, and I'll do it that way, that way, that way. And the person responds in a passive-aggressive way. No, you can't do it that way just because there's 10 reasons, 10 good reasons. And then somebody responds again, but now they're starting to use uppercase. Because now I'm shouting a little bit, you know, but I'm not shouting because I'm behind my keyboard, so I'm not really shouting too hard. And then I'm going to use color fonts to point out that not only I'm in uppercase, but it's in bold. I've moved to font 14, and I'm going to use red. What does it tell you? It tells you I'm shouting and I'm really pissed off, but I don't want to say it. And when you have time zone differences, what happens when you wake up? The first email you see is this email with all these reds in font 14 that says you're a moron and you should do it my way. So one thing that we've solved is we force our teams to speak. We force our teams to use Hangouts, video, because video breaks the boundaries. When you see the other human on the other side, you realize, it's a human. Oh, now I have far more empathy. It's not the email that came back. It's the human that is talking to me. So that's one of the things that we've learned, is we force them to talk to each other more frequently. We force them to be on video, and we force them to see each other.
Judging by the reaction of the audience, looks like the font size and the colors is something that everyone could relate to. Anyway, so that brings us to our philosophy as well. We have been sort of expanding across multiple countries, been here for about 13 years as an AWS business and 25 years with the .com business, and that's a challenge we have as well. As we expand our countries, we are not just a US-centric company anymore. And we've got various processes built into our hiring to ensure that we do not lower our hiring bar. And the number one thing that we test literally in a hiring process is culture, right? We want people to be aligned to our culture. And then obviously we do functional testing in terms of tech or in otherwise, but those things, even if there are gaps, they can be coachable. And so we never ever compromise with it. And some of you may have read about this in blog posts. We have the famous bar raiser process as a process of our hiring, which means a person that is there in every loop or every interview process of every candidate who tends to be a bar raiser, who is outside of the organization of the hiring manager. And that person on the call, when we're discussing the feedback of the candidate, strengths and weaknesses, is the person who has the veto power to say no if he or she feels that this is not the right hire. And the idea there is if someone is outside of the hiring manager's org, then that person will make a neutral decision. And every single hire in Amazon goes through this. It's extremely painful in terms of the times and hours we put into it, but it's extremely relevant. And what we have achieved today, till date, is really a large part of that is because of a hiring process. And you can Google this, you can search for this, and you'll have an entire sort of blog post written on what a bar is, entails, and why we do it. And this thing about maintaining the consistency of our bar across countries, across continents, to ensure that we do not dilute that ever as we go through countries which are culturally diverse as well. What about your hiring processes, Emmanuel?
So let's not kid ourselves. It's hard. It's hard to find people. It's hard to find good people. You're all going to struggle. You're all struggling. I'm struggling every day of the week on that. I'm still looking for 100 new engineers. So it's tough. And I like to say it's a war for talent. And I like to use a little story that you and I were talking about yesterday, is that even your dry cleaner today has a CTO, a DevOps team, etc. Why am I saying that? Because there's likelihood there is an app for your dry cleaner where you can schedule the delivery of your dry cleaning. And I will send you a push notification to tell you that your dry cleaning is ready, you owe me X number of Singapore dollars, come and pick it up between those hours and those hours. There's a tech team behind it. Maybe not, your dry cleaner may not have all of that. They're giving it to somebody. But it's how common technology and engineering and building of apps, etc., has become, to the point where industries that you were not expecting have the same demands and running on AWS, etc. So in our world at iFlix, we are at the connective element of media and technology. Everybody's doing video, and it's in technology. And on top of that, because we run on the AWS platform, and you guys have a fair amount of success as a platform nowadays, apparently, there's demand. There's demand for media technology expertise, and there's demand for AWS expertise. So it's been very difficult in terms of hiring. That's why we've looked at where we can hire. That's why we've opened 5 development centers, because it's all about finding the talent. And when we find the talent, we tend to build around it. When we find a good leader, we tend to start building around them and not worry so much about where in the world they're based. We worry about, can they continue building a good team and as strong of a team with the same value that we have as a company, even though they're in Prague or they're in Melbourne or they're in Beijing.
So Emmanuel's anecdote of the CTO in the laundry, even a laundry has a CTO, reminds me of yesterday evening when I was over to the Blaze Clan booth, where they have kept an awesome chair. Like awesome is into these luxury massage chairs, and they have a chair, and they worked with Blaze Clan, our partners, to build an app which basically looks at points. It's connected by Bluetooth to the chair. That app runs on AWS, and I was sitting on the chair. I was initially reluctant with so much technology when I'm getting massaged. But he was showing me on an iPad how the app works, and it's collecting data points on tension points from my back as to what they're being massaged and going to a data lake. Right? So
the Kinesis stream right behind it's picking up those events and saying that you're very tense.
That's correct. That's correct. That's what I was doing. And it was awesome. So there's a huge technology in play in every field, more than what you know in areas. So luxury chairs are having Bluetooth connections, collecting data points from my back as it is massaged. Right. That brings me to the other philosophy that we have is as we're expanding as an organization, one, and Emmanuel hinted at this, we have a very, very intense culture of driving things and decisions with data. Right? So if you're in a meeting room in Amazon, and if you're arguing with someone on something, if you have the right data to prove something right, you are the winner there. That's it, period. There's no concept of seniority. And we use it ruthlessly in technology as well, with machine learning, with analytics, and the services that we are exposed to our customers as APIs today. And it's amazing as to when startups grow to become larger companies, to enterprises, as to how many redundant processes actually exist if you really look deep. And data is actually solves them. So I'll give you a quick story. I can't name the company in this case. There's a huge, big global insurance company, which many years ago had this process where anytime a customer, an end user, filed for an insurance claim, people used to type out the letter, print it out, fold it, keep it in a shelf in the office for 6 days or 5 days. No one knew what happened for those 5 days, but the letter was typed, printed, and then kept in the shelf for 5 days. Till the late 90s, literally, or early 2000, when someone started asking, why, give me data, and used data to prove something, and they found out that in the 40s and 30s, when ink was used to write letters, it used to take 6 days for the ink to dry, and that's why this process was introduced in the first place. And the process remained as it is for 60 years without people realizing as to why it exists. And so we are constantly looking at data to actually look at our redundant processes and then just rip them off if they don't exist and constantly iterate. Right? So
we rely on diversity. It's extremely important you have diversity. So I like to think of iFlix as a mini United Nations. 700 employees, we're in 23 countries, so we have all ethnicities, gender, religion, everything. And that diversity means that you have different point of views. So we embrace that difference. We really push people as well very hard. So one of the things that when you join iFlix, we don't sugarcoat feedback. You join iFlix to become a better professional, a better human, a better everything that you can be. The best of you is going to come out when you join iFlix. That's what we're going to drive out of you. So if you're an engineer or a rock star that would like to be massaged, your ego is a little bit too big and you can't take the feedback, we're in the wrong place for you. Because we're all here, and I'm here at iFlix because my boss is hard with me. He drives me hard. He drives me to become a better person. He drives me to be a better professional, ask better questions. So that diversity, that difference of opinion is extremely important for us. We also, something that we have that is quite unique, we call them the 11:30 p.m. honesty hour. That's a concept that was new to me. I came from a company where we were very good at communicating and at ensuring that there was some sort of a party line that was respected. At iFlix, we have a different method. It's the 11:30 p.m. honesty hour is a concept that you've got to a little bit comprehend. Imagine being in a bar, having a couple of drinks. It's 11:30 p.m. if you do drink, and you're a bit more loose. And the question you ask at 11:30 p.m. of your peer group in the bar are very different than the question you ask in the boardroom at 10 a.m. Because at 10 a.m. you've got the mask on. We spoke about the mask and that pretend that you want to be conforming to everybody else. At 11:30 p.m., now you're loose, you're ready, and you're not holding punches anymore. That's what we want. We want that questioning. We want that ability to be direct and to the point on day one. Because our jobs in a startup are very difficult. Your jobs are very difficult. First of all, we picked up media entertainment as a place to go and compete. Every broadcaster in the world is there. Every tech company in the world is there. My friends at Amazon are there as well with Prime. There is so much competition. We probably have one of the smallest teams to do that. So when you start your day and you think that you are the incumbent, your incumbents are much bigger than you, the disrupting that ecosystem is much more difficult than you can ever anticipate, and the consumer has so much more choice than you have ever imagined. If you don't push yourself hard, if you don't have this ability to get the better out of yourself, if you don't have the possibility to get the better out of your teams, you're not going to get there. So one of the things that we've learned, and one of the things that we apply, is very constructive but very direct feedback. Extremely important. The people that join iFlix seek it. The people that are winners, the people that want to build disruptive experiences, seek that feedback. They want to get better. We have this concept of transparency, that 11:30 p.m. honesty, where you can ask anything you want. And at the end of the day, we remind everybody that what we do is very hard, but we're the only ones that can do what we do, because whatever it takes is what we're going to do. And we won't compromise on that.
Are there any preferred brands of beers and vodkas that you use in the honesty hours? Is there like SOP around that?
So there is no SOP around that. And not everybody drinks, so the 11:30 p.m. honesty hour doesn't always work with alcohol, but it's just a concept that we have. So there is no sponsor. Maybe we can find a sponsor for 11:30 p.m. honesty hour.
And you do that personally on a frequent basis as well with your team?
Yeah, so I do it. I hold it myself. I hold it with my direct reports all the time, pretty much. But my direct reports hold their honesty hours. Their team holds honesty hours. Our CEO does it to the entire company. And we stream it live on Facebook for all our offices, and everybody contributes questions in real time. And the question will come from funding questions. We're a startup. We have funding. We have sometimes funding challenges. If you're an employee of a startup, you understand that you made a lifestyle. As far as I'm concerned, you made a lifestyle choice. You can work for a Fortune 500 company and have a cozy job. I worked for a Fortune 500 company for 17 years, so I know what it is. Or you can work for a startup with the uncertainty, but the rewards. The rewards are tenfold the uncertainty, because what you work on is extremely unique. But you may have questions about funding. And in a big company, how do you ask questions about cash flow? Do you go to the treasurer of the company, of the big company, and say, hey, Mr. or Mrs. Treasurer, I would like to know how our cash flow is doing. How do you think you're going to get a response? Not a great response, none of your business type of answer. In our world, our CEO gets that question all the time. And he answers it, because that's the reality. You made a choice as an employee. We need to be fair to you. We need to tell you what happened, what is good or what is bad.
All right, the last piece was the way we build products and services. And some of our customers have actually taken a cue from this, because it works great from us, which is to ensure that you're not building something for your customers that sounds fluffy. Someone has an idea and starts building something that sounds fluffy and it's not clear. The rule in Amazon, almost every time you build something major on the .com side on AWS, is people write a narrative, a press release, a mock press release of a product that is an ideation stage, to ensure that all the ideas are fleshed out and we know what the customer benefits are. And one of the things that we encourage people to do when they're writing this mock press release and a narrative is imagine there are no constraints. Right? Just imagine, apart from laws of physics which can't be broken, which are difficult, but imagine there are no legal compliance or other constraints, and write the press release for a product or a service that is perfectly viable for a customer to solve a certain problem, and that product might be released 1-2 years from now. And what that does is it allows us to think bigger and work backwards from a big goal, which we wouldn't have had we just not think big, thought the way that I just described, which is no constraints. And that's how the Amazon Go store came up, for example. Someone in Seattle had an idea saying that this is this ridiculous thing that's existed for years, which is someone runs in on a rainy day on way to office, picks up a sandwich or a yogurt from a store, and then the customer is giving you business, and you're making the customer stand in a queue to actually check out, because there's a long queue of the checkout counter. And how about building a store with no checkout counters? So someone first said, let's actually use our fulfillment centers because they are so big, one of the fulfillment centers, and have lots and lots of checkout counters, which means the queues will be shorter. But that wouldn't really solve the problem. It would be a workaround. And so we went back to our original philosophy. Said, just imagine there are no constraints. Let's write a press release for a store that doesn't have checkout counters. We can figure out a way later to charge our customers. And that's how this store was invented, because we wrote a press release for something that was not invented, which is basically a machine learning, sensor vision infused store.
So closing on the hiring, we also publish quite openly the reasons why you should not join us. It's deliberate, it's provocative, and it's deliberate. If you don't want to get pushed, don't join us. If you want to get better, don't join us. If you don't want to be challenged in your decision because you're not data-driven, don't join us. Because we really want to make sure that when you join us, you've understood the reasons that motivated you to join us. When I joined iFlix, there were deep reasons that motivated me to join.
All right, with that, as I said in the beginning as well, you don't have to be a very small startup that's just beginning. You're literally day one to actually be innovative and agile. You can still go through the explosive growth phase and be agile and innovative. It's come down to culture, or as Emmanuel put it, the Tao iFlix. As long as you sustain that and you keep hiring people after people, and that's consistent, products and services and technology is a byproduct of that to our customers.
As a closing, I would say that one thing that we want to make sure our teams are federated around is the fact that we're building world-class technology, but we're doing it locally. We're executing that locally, which is very unique to us because we're not doing it in one central location. We want to make sure when you do it, we do it in Indonesia, we do it in Malaysia, in the Philippines, in Thailand, everywhere else.
All right, thank you. That's all we have time for.